So I showed you a little bit earlier. This actually, do we? Yeah, we're running out of time a bit, aren't we? But how is everybody?
We're not actually constrained by time other than what you have available.
Right. Well, I'll carry on. I'll tell you what, can you give me a few moments to get rid of some tea?
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah.
So
was that tea?
Yeah.
Or was it with a P?
No,
Yeah,
that was
both actually, John, both. Excuse me a moment, all right?
I think I'll join you on that one, Tim.
Yeah, me too.
Does everybody find this type of presentation useful, helpful, interesting even?
Very interesting, Mick. Very good.
Yeah, really enjoying them, Mick.
Good. Good.
Yeah, same from me, Mick. Superb.
Very good. One question I have is Tim's presentation, particularly on the Great Central Engine, is that going to be on video eventually to relook at?
Yes, Tony, all 4 of this weekend's presentations are being recorded and will be available for anybody and everybody to have a look at, probably from Monday onwards, maybe sooner, but certainly from Monday onwards.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
And you can access them through the Missenden Abbey Railway Modellers website.
Yeah.
Following on from that, Mick, the ones that we had end of last year, I assume, are still available as well.
Yes, they are, Paul. Yeah, through the website, you can go and look at everything that took place in the autumn.
Yeah, and certainly found that really useful as well. So it's a cracking resource. Thank you.
Good. That's nice to know.
I can confirm the autumn one's on because I was looking at it this morning.
Shall we carry on?
Yes, back to you, Tim.
Okay, so let's get back to here. So at the south end of Copenhagen Fields, you have the other end, well, the south end of the Piccadilly line before King's Cross, which is York Road. And this is a picture of York Road Tube Station in 1927. And it's a classic Leslie Green building. And it's a beautiful picture from the LT Museum. Very interesting underground sign on the roof of it there. But that's what it is. I've only seen one other version of that on another building in one of the underground stations. Horizontal versions of that are very common, but not the vertical one. So it's a bit different. So the layout often works by actually building it in with mock-ups a little bit to actually check whether something looks like it's going to work or not. So this was a cardboard mock-up that was made of the tube station. And you can see here, if I bring it back to my camera here, on here, you can see this is the mock-up, and you can see the shape of it was to fit the shape of the baseboard at the south end. So this was made out of cardboard, obviously, and printed off. And the drawing was a CAD drawing, which was drawn up by Jim Watt prior to making some etches for the tube station. Now, the original tube station was completely scratch built at Caledonian Road, but nowadays we have technology, and my goodness, we have technology. So this was made up with a rather different approach, shall we say. So let's go back here. That's working now. So there we see the thing under construction, and we can see this funny shape to the building. And when I make buildings, especially on Copenhagen Fields in 2 mil, I usually make them with very strong carcasses on which the walls and so on will be fixed. So this was a rough out of the shape of the building, and you can see the mock-up there. And this was done in our camper van down in Cornwall last summer while we weren't in lockdown. And you can see there the beginnings of the windows and so on. Jim drew it up as a CAD package in order that he could produce a set of artwork for the windows and the office fronts here and so on. And at the same time, another 2mm modeler, Richard Wilson, took the CAD drawings and then developed those to produce a 3D printed decorative components of the station with the dentil courses and the arches and so on. So each section of the building was made up, and whilst we didn't have a decent drawing of York Road Tube Station, there was some low resolution stuff available on the web, but nothing high resolution. You could copy off the original drawings we had for the Caledonian Road, because these are modular buildings. But each of these sections, whilst this 3D printing actually speeded up construction massively, there are 50 components in each of these sections. And these little motifs were carved out of plastic using very sharp chisels that I got from Japan. They are wickedly sharp chisels, like scalpel sharp, and beautiful for doing little tiddly things like that. So that's the kit being built up. Painting it was done with a variety of red oxides and maroons and so on. And then the brick courses, tile courses rather, were scribed in using a pair of dividers, and then the verticals scribed in freehand. The surface was then actually varnished or given a coat of acrylic with a slight yellow wash in it to produce the right appearance. So this is a site visit. It's on the way to Keene House from home in St Albans. So it's in, quite often would look at it. And so I took the model along there and noticed that, I'm color coordinated with the model as well, and the real thing there with red trousers and suitable. Anyway, never mind. So the actual model was made, and it was all looking very good until a lot more information started to appear, like better pictures and more knowledgeable people coming on board, producing images, data, drawings, and so on. So what we did was to do the interior. Not that anybody will see it because it's on the wrong side of the viewing public, but the operator will see it. And we sort of worked out as best we could, what was inside these buildings, because this was clearly a ticket hall, and it had protective barriers on it, protective mesh on the glass. This was a stairwell going up to the offices upstairs, and this end was closed off and not used. At the same time, I got in touch with a chap called Doug Rose, who surveyed all of the green tube stations, so the underground tube stations, and made drawings of the platforms, dead scale, with all the tile patterns. And so that was a good basis to start thinking, well, maybe we should make this model a little bit more full than it was originally going to be. Because originally it was just going to be a fill-in on the end of the layout, end of story, chopped in half effectively by that curved baseboard face, and that was that. So to do the interior, I've used here, you can see some artwork, which I drew up to a very large size. So this is now shrunk down to 2mm scale. So that's the underground sign at the top. And these are the green tiles which were present in the actual station entrance hall and upstairs on the ground floor. Now you're all, I would presume, familiar with this thing. And you can see here the original Caledonian Road tube. And you can see here, sketched in, roughed in, the York Road tube. And then it began to occur to us, well, surely couldn't we join the two up? And so the plan, it's not yet reached fruition, but it's going to, was to make the underground join up and to go along the front of the layout at low level, slightly deeper than it should be, but nobody's going to know. And it's actually a very difficult measurement to get accurately, in fact, from the real thing even. And you can see there that this will be visible. And the yellow line here will be the York Road platform. Now there's a little problem of a Toblerone, we call it, lighting column here. But York Road actually had a crossover. So what will happen on the model is a train will leave Caledonian Road, come down south to York Road, and then there'll be an incident at King's Cross, whereby it then needs to reverse to the northbound line and then go back up and so on and so forth. So that's it, sort of showing where it could be. Now, as time went on, we got better and better information. And there's an article I've written on this, which has been in the Club magazine, it'll be in the 2 Mil magazine, and probably also in MRJ at some point, about how to build a model and not to build it wrong in the first place. And that's effectively what we did in the first place. So over time, the design shifted and changed, and more information came out. So we have the full plans for the underground bit. We have full plans for the upstairs bit. And it seemed a shame not to then make it more of an extensive model. So here is the drawings. We got eventually high resolution images of these showing the frontage and sections through the building and so on. And eventually we got all of the other drawings associated with these so we could make a pretty accurate model of it. So then you're left with the question of how do you do it on the layout? So it occurred to me that it might be useful to have some base datum to work from. So the base of the building was cut out of a piece of steel plate, and that steel plate was worked off the drawings to be, as accurate as the drawings are, but they were scaled, obviously. And then that has a useful function that can be fixed to the layout and held down by a string of magnets. Now, modern magnets are viciously powerful. And so that will clunk down that building beautifully there. And you've got to say, well, why did they go to all that hassle? Why not just have it fixed here? That means that the joint is actually on the pavement edge, which is not an unnatural place for a joint to be, rather than round the edge of the building. And also the building is actually quite delicate. So having that plaza, so-called, if you like, in front of it, meant that it could be much protected by the steel plate. So the steel plate eventually became part of the main building. And then we had to work out how we were going to do all of the underground bits. And it's terribly complicated. It's a bit like the entrance to the Pharaoh's tomb in the pyramid at Giza. It goes all over the place with spiral stairs and passageways and Lord knows what. But work it out from the drawings. And the other thing is it has all these toilets and things as well. It has things like air conditioning or ventilation rather. And so this was drawn up from the plans that we had. Richard Wilson is a ventilation engineer, mechanical and electrical ventilation engineer. So he drew that up. That was 3D printed. And that was then built into the plant room, which is buried under the station in the basement part of the layout. And these bits here, this clunks up into place with magnets to hold it in place under the station there. Okay, so that's that. So that's the interior. And what you can see here are the ladies' loos, the powder room. There's a mirror there now, in fact, since this photograph was taken. So these loos were drawn in Brisbane, Australia, and printed, 3D printed in Croydon and installed in St Albans, and ditto for the gents loos. And there are pictures of these still exist. These ones don't, but the gents urinals still exist. So again, it's a 3D print, and the tiles there and all the rest of it. Now, the chap sitting on the loo there, he started off as a Model U figure, and he had some major plastic surgery to take his trousers down, give him some knickers, and he's reading a fag paper in the toilet there. So he's going to become quite popular, I think. We got the staff room and so on, but the whole thing basically is lit with surface mount LEDs, and that gives you the underground visible there. But the next stage will be to do the lift shaft there, the ventilation shaft, which has nothing in it, and the original stair shaft, which also had a ventilation pipe up the middle of it with a spiral stairway. And the aim is that those will be sections. So you'll see the spiral staircase for part of its distance. And also, sorry, slipped off again. Come on. Also, you'll see the lift car going up and down in there over a short window as well. So those are all in hand to be made and 3D printed or engineered accordingly. And this will be the visible part of the underground here. So you'll see the station. This is the green baseboard edge. So York Road and the buildings are all up there. And this is a view through the tunnels. And now we have accurate drawings for the whole tunnel complex. We have all the drawings of this area. So the actual tunnel linings and everything will be accurately drawn out for the crossover and 3D printed for the tunnel lining. This is just a prototype to see how it would work. And this is the original tube train that Stuart made. And there you see this, the building sitting in situ as it was about 2 months ago. All right. And there we see it on a misty morning, waiting for the sun to burn off the mist and so on. So it's a bit of a moody picture there for the York Road tube. Any questions on that?
Everyone's sitting there in total awe, Tim.
I think I've killed the conversation rather, haven't I?
I think we're rather stunned.
Yeah. Does the underground sign actually light up, Tim?
I'm sorry.
Does the underground sign actually light up?
No, it's daylight. I'm sorry. No, it's actually a solid lump of brass with the wire, with the supports soldered into it, because it's pretty vulnerable. I mean, the tube building lifts off in one lump, and I haven't really worked out how we'll do the vertical tubes for the lift shafts and the station and so on. So very much a work in progress. This bit of the layout hasn't been joined up with the rest of the layout since long time ago. You know, since the autumn.
Okay.
It wasn't even up then, of course, because that wasn't up over the summer at all. So it's very much a work in progress. I mean, it's spawned a whole series of changes to the layout, and it's not had a knock-on effect, so that the goods yard and the south end of the layout is going to be totally different when it next goes out or when it's next seen, because it's had so much work done on it. And it's always was going to, but the lockdown has meant actually that it's happened rather quicker, or rather more concentrated perhaps than it would otherwise have done. And I think the tube's idea of the extension of the tube has really caught people's imagination as well. It will be quite fun, I think, to see it. It will be modelled. It might join up with Caledonian Road. It doesn't have to join up. It's logistically a bit of a nightmare to make a train run 26 feet under cover, if you know what I mean. But it can be done. But it could equally well be done just as two separate layouts, because you're never going to see both together in one view. And the aim is that we will make some gate stock. 1927 that went, so it's just in period to have it. And that will really make people sit up and wonder what the hell's going on when you have a tube train that has a gateman between each carriage to make the gates work, riding between the carriages. That will really make people think, what the devil is all this about? So that will be fun, but we haven't got there yet. We haven't made the whole things yet. So that's the tube station that's coming on.
Tim, where you mentioned a lot of drawings, where did you get all those from? It must be quite a job to find such drawings.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. And what's happened is that as we've got to make contacts, more and more contacts have come out of the woodworks. And it's a funny thing. Underground information is very secretive. You could argue there's good reasons for that being so, but it's very hard to get from published sources. But we've been very fortunate that we picked up some really good contacts in London Transport, in various parts of it. And they've really been absolutely wonderful for getting stuff out, but it's not publicly available at all, and nor will it be, because we can't, you know, it's under the understanding that it's to make the model, no more or less than that. you know, for instance, getting all of the tunnel drawings for the crossover means, you know, Richard Wilson is doing the 3D printing, and he can just make the drawings dead accurate, so that the tunnel will be dead accurate, as within the limits of the model, of course. So it's going to be quite a museum. Well, that's being a bit pretentious. It's going to be quite an educational model, I think, for people, because they'll see what a tube station actually looks like in section. So it's a bit of a doll's house, really, at the back. So what you've got, obviously, is sections through the building, and it's got plastic cover over it, polycarbonate over it to protect it, of course. But you know, you've got plant rooms, you've got storerooms, you've got office space, you've got the plant room for the fan here. The fan for that still exists. It's down on the, it's knocking around inside the building, because I've seen photos of it, and I might actually, with a bit of luck, get into that building fairly sometime this year, I think. So it's as good as I can make it to the drawings that have turned up. But it wasn't how it was originally planned. And so it's taken far, far longer than was originally planned, but it's sort of grown into a project in its own right almost. And as I say, I think it will be quite fun when it's on the layout and being seen on the circuit once we get out on the circuit.
Yeah,
so,
the one, Tim, sorry, the one thing I'd be clear about is what would you do for track maintenance? I mean, are you going to have lifting sections? What would happen if something disappeared, or if you got one of the heaven forbid it wouldn't happen, but if you got one of your trains stuck halfway between the two stations?
Well, the visible track, which would be all along the front of the layout, would be open, and so what we're talking about is this bit here. That would be all open, and the tunnel sections themselves would be able to be lifted off. They are they're being 3D printed, or they will be. I haven't started yet. So you can see there a little section of the 3D printed tunnel wall. So all of this will lift off, and you'll be able to get to the track and the track behind, because there's two tracks, of course. The track itself won't be dead accurate. The rails will all be at the same level, because it's a real hostage to fortune to have your conductor rails higher than the running rails in this sort of setup. Don't tell anybody though, will you? And so the actual thing will have to have good access. The problem we have is that the bit that goes from here, from here to here is going to be much more challenging, because that's underneath the layout, behind the drape. There's a leg box and supports and so on. So until we get it set up at the club, we don't know how we're going to engineer that. And as I said, it may be that we just do it as two separate layouts, quite frankly, and keep them independent of each other. Because one of the sort of mantras of CF is that if one bit fails, the other bits still keep going. It's got a lot of redundancy built into it, so it's a pig to keep on top of, but equally it's unusual for it to completely fail unless the whole power goes off the whole area, you know. So we'll see. I'm not making promises on that one way or the other, but the fact that the train will sit here and then reverse, I think, is a good thing, because otherwise it would be logistically impossible to model, because our end of the layout is here, and that's the end of Keene House also. So we can't make it any longer. And already it's making the layout a little bit thicker here. So the barrier might have to push back 6 inches, because that's about the distance. It will make it wider, so that's fine. But what it does mean is this whole area here is changing very fast. That is moving on also. I mean, I've got a few more pictures if you want to carry on. Do you want? What's the We're now
Tim,
20
can
past 4.
Can I just ask,
Yeah,
in terms of the viewing public being able to see all that,
yeah.
are you going to make any differences to the way in which the public can approach the layout so people will actually be able to see it? And how about, I don't know, CCTV or something so that people can, who aren't right at the front, might be able to see more of it?
We've been there. The problem is, if you see the size of Copenhagen Field and its complexity, it's already on the edge of what we can do, setting up on a Friday afternoon evening to set up a layout for the show to run on the Saturday morning. Never come and speak to me on a Saturday morning at an exhibition, because you will get very short answers, I tell you, because it's not a nightmare, but it's a big undertaking. So putting in CCTV and all this sort of thing, yes, we've had it in the past. We've had monitors and small cameras on it, but it ups the number of bits and pieces you've got to carry. And already by doing this, we're upping the ante again. So no, that won't change. But equally, because it's right on the front, it's perfect position, of course, for the kids to see. And the adults will see it because it'll be, you know, running along the front of the baseboard edge. So it's going to be visible. And historically, when you look at the layout, you'd get most crowds around this area because it's where everything seems to be going on. It will balance it out because there'll be now a lot more going on in this area at the south end. And the goods shed and the goods yard is the next area for that, is what's developing on that. So yeah, you know, it's as it is. The barrier works pretty effectively. It keeps the public back far enough so that everybody can see the layout. But to get really close to it, you've got to come to Keene House. And actually what we're looking at doing is having a special open day or open days at the club, which will only be for a very limited number of people to come in to Keene House because of all the COVID business and so on. And Copenhagen Fields will be fully up, not with the lighting on, but just fully set up in the middle of the lower hall. We'll have probably half a dozen people in the hall at any one time. So 4 visitors, maybe 6 perhaps. And they'll have a guided tour of the layout. There's no barriers on it. They'll be able to go around it, behind it, under it, whatever way you like it, and even run it if they want to. And that will be on a sort of ticketed basis. And essentially, you'll be able to see the layout under conditions that you just do not see at a show. And you'll see views that you don't see at a show either, because there are lots of views the public don't get. And that's something I think which could be quite popular, I think. And but as far as the club is concerned, it justifies the layout, and also, of course, it will generate a little bit of income as well, which you know we do need to be well aware of course. So that's a, you know, watch this space. There will be publicity around that, I suspect.
Can I ask a couple of questions, sort of related to what you're saying, but one from before? The tube, the underground train. Are you thinking of running that with some sort of automation?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I thought, yeah. So you haven't got somebody sitting there just controlling the train backwards and forwards.
Well, do you know what? I mean, Stuart Hine made the original tube, fully automated, incredibly clever, as you would expect from Stuart Hine. It never worked. Because Stuart made a wonderful design job of it, but the execution
was not so good. Okay. The other question I've got is you talked about.
So over the years, it's been stripped out and simplified and simplified and simplified. So it actually no longer, it just shuttles up and down. And it is somebody with an on-off switch making it go up and down on one line, which isn't correct, of course. The new layout, what we will aim to do is it'll be DCC, it'll have stay alives in it, it'll have every modern technique we can put in to make it work reliably, you know? And so that's for new normal, if you like to use a horrible phrase. So that it will be better engineered, and also the tube mechanisms itself will be better engineered as well. So that's what we're at. Sorry, you were going to say.
No. Well, that's fine. So no doubt you'll be using CBus.
It's beyond my pay grade, John, to talk about things like that.
Okay. So the other questions were about the exhibition. So have you got any, are there any plans that you know where you're going to be exhibiting? Maybe in 22, or is it sort of,
I mean,
up in the air?
for sure we'll be at Ali Pali in 22. You know, that if that doesn't happen, life will be pretty miserable, won't it? You know.
And long term, there was, I seem to remember reading somewhere that somebody had suggested that it would be an ideal candidate for the this model railway museum thing down in Ashford. And I just wondered whether you had any thoughts, or the group had any thoughts about its long term.
It's 34 years old. I think it's got another 20 years to go yet, John. So I think we'll worry about that when we come to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it.
I think the Keene House idea.
James, you have a question.
Yes, I did. This is for Tim. When you build the York Road tube platforms, I saw how you were going to do how the track was made for the tunnel section, but for the platform section, there is a distinctive difference in tube lines there, which has a suicide pit.
No, they didn't. The suicide pits came in 1934, 35, 36, and York Road Tube was closed in 1932. And the Caledonian Road wrongly has suicide pits on it. And so as a prototype for the new track, we're going to take that out and relay it with no suicide pits. The track will be made by milling the sleepers into PCB, just very slightly milling it, because underground track in tunnels has virtually no ballast to speak of. And so it'll be a very flush surface. So no, it won't need a suicide pit, which is a good thing, because Stuart modelled a suicide pit at York Road, at Caledonian Road, but it meant the track is very vulnerable, very, 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 very delicate, and hence it doesn't work very well. So that'll be a good way to make it more reliable.
Because you can actually install it with the Pico kit range, the suicide pit, if you wanted to model the tube station accurately.
I don't think a Pico. Anyway,
you can do that. Pico is the supplier of that.
Well, as I say, it's not going to have it, so it'll be flat, literally flat track, because it'll be a flat PCB board bonded to the baseboard edge, but baseboard surface, in fact.
So it'll be just like the Holborn platform, which was leading on the Aldwych branch, which I did get a tour of before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The closed Aldwych branch platform at Holborn.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think Andrew Hicks has got a question, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, how do you see the use of 3D printing changing over time, or evolving over time? Because I get a feeling from what you've shown here that this is just sort of dipping the toe in the water as to possibilities.
It's frighteningly good. It used to be terrible. I mean, most of the models you saw looked like they were made out of corduroy trousers or Cadbury's flakes, whereas now, especially in 2mm, you've got the cheap, relatively cheap printers producing sub-micron resolution, well, micron resolution. And so the surfaces are getting really good. So for instance, you know, the tube obviously has quite a bit of input to it. In terms of rolling stock, if you give me a moment. This is a 3D printed, well, it's obvious what it is. It's a beaver tail observation car for the coronation. Now, you can't get much better than that. I mean, you might do better with etching, to be fair, on the carriage sides, but the shape is perfect. And that's what you can do now. So I'm all, it's going to go a long way. And certainly for the gate stock, for instance, the aim will be that at least the under half of the bodywork will be 3D printed. The roofs will be 3D printed. Probably go for a stainless steel etch for the windows and for the gates, because stainless etch is stronger and is, you know, you can get a finer line in stainless than you can in nickel and brass, I think. It's certainly stronger. So it'll, you know, you've got to choose your materials. But yeah, people are turning out stuff now where, you know, you're getting these crazy 3D shapes because you can, you know, but equally, you've got to then still be able to join up things and make things work mechanically sound. And I think sometimes that people think you can push these things so far, and you can, but the reality is that you sometimes have to step back and, you know, make a proper engineered job of it, or go back into a bit of heavy metal here and there and so on.
I know some people in the jewelry trade who are using 3D printing with metal now to even finer resolution than we're getting off the resin stuff.
Yes.
They're using 3D printers to make watches,
yeah,
and watch mechanisms and jewelry things that have never before been possible.
Yeah. It all comes down to the design. Who's at the end of the mouse, driving the mouse? That's what it comes down to, and the knowledge of the individual about how you can make it work. So yeah, no, it's a brave new world out there, and you know, I've deliberately not gone there personally because I like making things, but I'm all in favor of other people doing it, and I'll happily work with people to bring that together. So I think it's fantastic. It really is. And it's so good for relatively low runs of numbers and so on as well, of course, which is, again, an important consideration in model railway terms. So, I mean, all of the underground, all of the tube will be 3D printed, all of the arches and everything. My goodness me, to do that by any other means is just mind-blowing. To etch it, to cut it out, to physically make it, it couldn't have happened, I would say, this development without modern technologies. So, you know, the spiral staircase that's going to be modeled, perfect for 3D printing. It's a total migraine for anybody trying to scratch build it or build it by hand, really. So, you know, it's you know, it's what it's going to be.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I think we can safely call it a day now.
I think we can.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was really good, actually. Yeah. I admire you, and I just wish I had some of your skills, and also painting.
Thanks, Tim. Lots of inspiration there.
Yeah, very much. Thanks, Tim. Thanks. That's great.
Thank you very much. To catch up on upcoming things. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Good to see you.
Yes, Tim, thank you very much. You really know how to make someone feel very inadequate. Before today, I would have happily let anyone see my layout, but now I don't think I will. And I suspect that tomorrow, Mick will further reinforce that feeling of inadequacy. Thank you very much, Tim.
My pleasure.
Thank you for the inspiration, Tim. It was very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Great. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Tim, apologies. A very quick last question, and observation as well, as I may. Firstly, I think the whole underground situation, I think, makes more sense to have as little hidden track as possible, and possibly a timer between the two underground stations, and that makes complete sense. The quick question from me is with regards to relief on buildings and having that detail at the front of the layout versus your earlier on you showed about the printed textures and that, which looks really good. Is there a rule of thumb between where you'd have textured at the front and then printed perhaps towards the back seam?
Most of our buildings are done in styrene at the front, and there is a little bit of brick paper used, but not very much, because there's just not been the right color brick paper out there for London. If you know, it's not been available. And also, frankly, most of the people who do buildings work in styrene, so that's where it is. Massive numbers of the buildings, of course, are resin cast, So they're blocks of resin. And so those don't have any relief, but they're painted very carefully. And of course, the window moldings are all absolutely 3D and all the rest of it. But those are relatively old-fashioned technology now. At the back of the layout, the buildings are all wood, blocks of wood, sheets of plywood, and so on. And that again comes down to how well they're painted. So there is a massive lack of finesse in Copenhagen fields if you go further back. So where it's visible, it's done to the best we can do. And as you go back, you knock that standard down. And also you don't want fine detail at the back of the layout. You want it to merge into the distance. And that's all the philosophy of the model. Having said that, now we're working at the south end. There are areas which have been very crude in the past are now getting much more finesse in them and so on. So that's nice to see, but it's not. It's how the layout works basically. It's a bit of a con. It looks more detailed than it is, and your eye sees what you think you want to see, and that's how we like to make it work. Really, I think that's what we do.
Excellent, that's great, and thank you for your time today. Much
pleasure.
Thank you very much, Tim. Really interesting.
My pleasure. Pleasure. Yeah.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to sit down now. Thank you very much for coming, and especially thank you very much indeed, Tim, for everything you've shown us and explained. I, for one, have more questions now than I did before you started at the time.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it greatly.
Good. Well, that's nice to know.
Yeah. Do it another time. Do it in person. That would be the best thing.
Even better.
Even better. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody.